in a career like acting where so many things have already been accomplished by other actors, you don't necessarily set out to be the first of something.
What is the first so the people know?
So the first that I got was to be able to play Misty Knight, who was the first Black female superhero ever drawn. So that was, the first. And now to be the first Black woman to lead a show on CBS, which I didn't realize I was the first. Thank you very much. I didn't realize that I was technically the first until maybe 6 months ago. So I had already booked the job, been filming, been working, and somebody does an interview and they're like, as the first Black, I said, really? And I'm like Googling, like, certainly this couldn't be, And so having those as first, that I think my children's children will also be able to look to and be inspired by.
Let's Shoot with Pete Chapman is a podcast on directing for anybody that's quite simply ever watched anything. Pete converses with a wide range of fellow directors, writers, actors, showrunners, producers, executives, and more on a journey to determine just what makes a good director and why we'll always need stories. The Director is Pete Chapman's digital studio, built on the pillars of craftsmanship that ensure a unique vision. I'm talking about story, innovation, perspective. Learn more about The Director, and better yet, get your official Director's Chair wear by visiting www.drctr.video. That's drctr.video.
All right, what's up, people? I am here to welcome you to episode 4 of Let's Shoot with Pete Chapman. Obviously, that's who I am, and I'm keeping it in the family in this follow-up to our interview with Simone Missick. I am proud and honored to introduce y'all who don't know her already in this kind of conversation to Simone Missick. Simone is super talented. I had the pleasure of working with her on my short film BlackCard back in 2014, which was the thing that kind of got me going in the industry as far as at least on the radar of television diversity programs. And she's just a super talented actor who it's been a pleasure to watch grow and settle firmly into the number 1 on the call sheet seat of All Rise on CBS. So it's another kind of fly on the wall conversation. That's what I'm trying to do with each of these interviews that we do, and I hope you enjoy.
Roll sound. Speed.
The interview. Take 1.
Simone, thanks for joining the podcast. We appreciate you being here.
Are we calling it a chat with Chapman? I feel like that should be like,
hey,
on a T-shirt.
I'm 4 episodes or 3 episodes too late. I should have come to you earlier to get that.
Marketing. That's like my second.
Boom. It's there. I want to, so, I mean, first, obviously, like, thanks, I feel like we're going to hop around the journey. I think it's interesting to share with folks how, we were almost about to do some work together on the season finale of All Rise. And then COVID-19, which was supposed to be gone in 15 days. It was just going to go right away. That hasn't happened, and we got shut down. That was the job I was working. But I don't know if you read that script, but it was dope. And I was excited and amped to direct you on that. And they were like, yo, spend the money. Like,
I know. That was the thing that I was most heartbroken about. I was like, they were going to give him the money. Like, that's every director's dream. When they're just like, just fuck it up. And so, that was quite heartbreaking on many levels. And it is still jarring with the current state that we're living in. But, I have full confidence that season 2 is coming up. And, as much as I kept, pumping your name, I don't think that after, you already got hired, that we won't have you back. So there's a reason for
Well,
everything.
I'm looking forward to it. Well, before we dive into it, like how are you? Because the world is shifting. There's some positive things happening. There's a lens on the fucked up shit and the negativity that a lot of people have lived with forever. It's kind of, I don't want to say, I'll say recognize. It's so, words are so important now because there's the semantics of things have been the issue for so long. But let's just say there's more recognition and allyship around a lot of what's going on. But it's also tethered to horrible events that have been just, on rinse and repeat. How are you feeling? How are you kind of navigating this time?
To be quite honest, I have been doing a lot to just, as much as I can, shield myself from it. And I think, because it is on rinse and repeat, because it is, to me, a generational trauma that we have been living over and over and over again, that I have seen from the time I was a child to the time I remember the Rodney King beatings, growing up in a city like Detroit, knowing that it had the riots, knowing that my dad, marched on Washington, knowing what my grandparents had to deal with, all of the people who had to escape in my family from various, situations involving the white people getting, upset at whatever way that they chose to straighten their backs. All of that just lives so close to the edge in me. And it gets examined in work that I do often. I did a play a couple years ago and they wanted to do a reading of it again. And they ended up doing.
Was this a play I saw you in at the
Citizen at the, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So they did a reading for it. Thank you. They did a reading for it, Citizen, an American Lyric, and it was based off of a book of poetry. And that was such a traumatic theater experience. Like, you normally look for theater to be cathartic as an artist or to bring you to a different place. And I just always found myself angrier and angrier and angrier every time I did the play, because I'd done it 3 different times at 3 different places with 3 different audiences. But we know that white American theater it tends to be middle-aged, white. You might consider yourself liberal, but you're probably conservative. And so having to have these conversations, with different faces, but it's the same, I didn't know, and how are you feeling? And, very well-meaning. I have to protect myself from that. And at the same time, try to find inspiration from the small changes, which are major, the advances that we're making, the fact that Breonna's law got passed yesterday, the fact that there is, the mayor of LA has committed to slashing the budget for the police, the fact that in Minneapolis, they're talking about defunding the police and taking steps towards that, the things that are happening in Seattle, and all of these small changes that are happening incrementally globally that give me hope. But it's all the other stuff. Like every time I turn on the computer, there's another video of someone who got murdered that got swept under the rug. Nobody talked about it. That didn't make the news cycle. And so it's, that's how I am best managing it right now. 2 weeks ago, it was different. 2 weeks from now, it will be different. You can't just close the world off and, say, but I think for mental health, which so many Black people don't necessarily get the opportunity to acknowledge. I was listening to the town hall with Oprah, and a doctor on there said that Black people who experience or witness the killing of Black people by police suffer from that PTSD for at least 3 months. How often are we constantly then resetting the 3-month cycle from that? So
you hit on an interesting point, because like I'm constantly as a writer and a director, there's like, you move through life and like you do things and then you kind of hop up to 10,000 feet and recognize it. So like, I'll give you like two examples. I remember when I was living in Newark, New Jersey on like a hood block, right? And when I moved to Jersey City, the day that the lease was signed and I went back to Newark, I was like, holy shit, I'm getting so tense the closer I get to home, because I have to be on high alert because I don't know what is going to pop off. And I lived like that for 8 years. You know what I'm saying? And it was just like, I mean, like I had like, I never walked on the sidewalk. I walked in the middle of the street because I like, just for me, like if I'm gonna get into something, you ain't gonna come out and surprise me. You're gonna have to take like 10 steps, my man. And you know what I mean? Like little shit like that, you know? And even yesterday, we were walking the dog and like you have your mask and then the same kind of anxiety you get when you see the cops in the rearview mirror, you know, we're going through fits and starts of, you know, taking the mask on and off. And then like you see the cops and you're like, fuck, should I put my mask on or are they going to fuck with me? Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, and people don't even move through the world like that. So all of that to get to a question, what responsibility do you think storytelling has in shaping the society that we've lived in?
I don't know if I can break it down to a percentage, but a huge responsibility. We are often the images that we see, the stories that we've heard. That's what shapes culture. Understanding bias, different, you know, the way that we subjugate people, all of that is based on the media, television, the movies we see, right? And I believe that, you know, there's always been that debate amongst Black creatives. It's like, I just want to be a storyteller. I just want to be an actor. I just want to be a writer. I just want to be a director. I don't want to be a Black writer, a Black director, a Black artist. And I completely understand where that comes from because it's the desire to be free, but it's also the idea that if one person isn't free, none of us are free, right? And so, yeah, you as the individual can make the decision, like, don't call me a Black actor, just call me an actor. But the fact is, there are a lot of people out there who are being influenced by the images that you put on screen that then make them decide who a whole culture of people are. And although it's unfair, there is nothing about life that is fair. And that is Black, white, brown, yellow, male, female, trans, gay, straight, Muslim, Hebrew, Jew, Gentile, like it doesn't matter. Life isn't fucking fair. And so as heavy as it is, we can't, as a collective, ignore the fact that what is seen on screen is the decision that most people end at with who an entire culture of people are. And, you know, I was just reading an article about Dick Wolf and the way that his programming for the past 20 years has shaped our society. And the article was in the LA Times, and it, you know, it started from the perspective of when you looked at TV before Dick Wolf, you had like Dragnet and Columbo or Matlock, and it was all about the defense lawyer protecting the innocent, the wrongly accused, the little guy. And then when Dick Wolf came along, you know the intro, the assistant DAs or the DAs and the cops. These are their stories, right? And so the perspective became on the cop, the good cop, the district attorney, the person that is, you know, prosecuting the criminals, which are often Black and brown, or, you know, a certain socioeconomic strata, and yes, the different shows vary on that. But if you look at the diversity or lack thereof in those rooms that he runs for 20 years, how can it be in a city like New York? How can those stories be really diverse if you've got a middle-aged white guy telling you what's going down in Brooklyn, what's happening in Harlem? And so that's what we watch on repeat all day long. And the shows that have been
And just to speak to your craft and tell me if I'm wrong, but that if you were a New York actor, that was your like training ground and there's a word I can't think of, but it was like a necessary like thing that you did.
That's the feather in your cap almost that you had to get in order
Right.
to say, well, I'm an actor. You know, you couldn't come from New York. I remember Dorian, my husband Dorian, who's also an actor, if you don't know, he was saying that he went to LA and took a meeting, and they were like, well, we don't see any Law and Order on your resume. Like, how are you a New York actor and you don't have any Law and Order on your resume? He's like,
Right.
shit, I gotta go back and book some Law and Order. He's like, I've been doing theater, I've been doing this and that. And so, yeah, it was like a necessity as a New York actor. But then when you look at what some of these stories are and how that then bled into the other programs, the other cop shows, the other lawyer shows, where it's all about prosecuting the bad people, which are usually going to be Black or brown and poor, and they're perpetuated as just straight evil. You know what I mean? And so that, and if you're looking at somebody who lives in a town where there are no people outside of their particular demographic, that's the only impression that they have. So
it becomes a diet, right? It becomes a diet. And as with any diet, you eat nothing but McDonald's, you know, you're going to have some hypertension. You get nothing but negative, threatening imagery of people. It creates a different kind of hypertension. I just came up with that on the spot. I
like that. That needs to be we need to lower the blood pressure of people all across the world.
Well, let's rewind back to the first moment that you saw a story and it had a significant impact on you. Or heard a story. It might have been at the table. It might have been about a great uncle or something, but like where you kind of felt the impact of how what people do and then how it's recounted to someone or a group of people can be powerful.
I think that for me, it was probably the story about my my great grandfather who passed away when I was about 9, but he was my dad's best friend. That was his granddad. They had a very close relationship. His name was Maceo Albany, but we called him Buddy. And the thing that I always remember my dad telling me about Buddy when I was growing up, because he lived in DC and we lived in Detroit, so I would only see him like twice a year, was that Buddy was the first Black man to carry mail by train in the United States. And that he was featured in the Smithsonian Museum, but didn't tell anybody in the family. And so it wasn't until after the exhibit was over, they were like, wait, what? What do you mean you were in the Smithsonian? But which was right up the street from them. But that Buddy carried a pistol, and that was empowering for a Black man at that time. And that he had, you know, run-ins trying to do his job with various white people who did not like the idea of a Black man standing up with his back straight. And I just remember this immense sense of pride, like, oh, I've got somebody in my family who actually did something. I've got somebody in my family who accomplished something that other people thought was great. And, you know, I remember that being at a very young age, the idea of how important that was to have someone that I could look at in my family that was considered great on some level, you know, the first of something. And, I just remember how important that is, how important that was, how influential it was, how much pride I had behind it. And it's funny, I've gotten, now that I think about it, I've gotten the blessing of having so many firsts in my career, you know, and never really looked at, I mean, you don't set out, some people do, but, you know, in a career like acting where so many things have already been accomplished by other actors, you don't necessarily set out to be the first of something, you know, and yet these first.
What is the first, so the people know?
So the first that I got was to be able to play Misty Knight. who was the first Black female superhero ever drawn. So that was a first, that I was the first person to be able to inhabit that character who was also a first, right?
Right.
And she was animated by two animators, but one of whom was a Black guy from Detroit, my hometown. And she was written to be from Detroit originally and moved to Harlem, which I thought was so interesting because, economy.
I want to change the scenery.
Exactly. So that was, the first, and now to be the first Black woman to lead a show on CBS, which I didn't realize I was the first. Thank you very much. I didn't realize that I was technically the first until maybe 6 months ago. So I had already booked the job, been filming, been working, and somebody does an interview and they're like, as the first Black, I said, really? And I'm like Googling, like, certainly this couldn't be, and so having those as first, that I think my children's children will also be able to look to and be inspired by, and hopefully take that up and run with it, to have a sense of pride in something that they have no control over, they didn't make happen. But I mean, think about the number of people who are set off on a course in life about stuff that they didn't have any hand in doing. And so hopefully this is not only inspirational to my family but to other Black and brown kids.
Just a quick question. Was the Lola Carmichael character always written to be Black?
No.
Okay.
No, not as I understand it. No. And I mean, not as I've ever heard it. No. And I was actually the last piece of the puzzle. I was the last person to get cast. And if they did not find me, I'm not sure if the show would have made it to the air. And so that, that's right. I think, but I think that it's everything happens the way it's supposed to happen. I think it's a good, reason. It was good for me, but yeah, no.
Well, that's dope. I knew those first, but I just recognized, like, I wonder if, I just thought about that. Like, I wonder if that was the way the character had always been written.
Yeah. So for you, I'm curious, what was your first image that you then thought, this is.
Yeah, it's, it's interesting. I say it all the time. It is the smallest of moments. Before I cleaned up the back of this office, I had a bunch of Air Jordans over there because I'm stereotypical and I'm doing my part. and so in Do the Right Thing, when Bugging Out got his Jordan scuffed, and was like that was the first moment. That was 1989, so I'm 12 years old. I haven't seen many movies, right? Like, if I were to go through the Rolodex of movies in my life, by that time I've probably seen, I'm making this up, maybe 15. Like really, how many did you see? You saw E.T., you saw, and so I remember looking at that and I was like, yo, that happens to me. That's how I feel about that. Because I had finally, it took years of begging, and I was finally just made to shut up by some Jordans that probably, made us not eat the way we would for like a week or two. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I was just like, man, like the moment of seeing myself on screen and being able to say, wow, I'm reflected. There's a mirror, and also, like, I was always a bit of a storyteller. Like, I used to like creative writing, and then I was rapping, you know what I mean? And it was just kind of like, this is an opportunity to, this was a moment that propelled me forward in finding value in the things that I thought about. So, and you need that. That's why it's super important that people see a character like Lola as a judge, or, my wife, Kelly, little girls dress up as Maggie Pierce for Halloween.
Which is so dope.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
so you can't, like, this idea that representation doesn't matter, and I don't think people say it as an idea, but there's maybe not a cosign in the value of it. Well, folks are very much aware of the value of representation. It's just, who are they willing to pass it to?
Yeah.
How'd you get your start?
How did I get my start? I mean, let's see. I minored in theater at Howard, which was a huge kind of a leap for me. I started out as an English major. Always knew I wanted to be an actor. I was too scared to go after it, to go full throttle going into college, because I knew that it was the one thing that I really wanted to do, and yet had no pathway for it. Hadn't done it in high school. You know, you always have those kids who are like, well, I'm in drama. And I was like, they're lames. So I just played sports and played music. I was a violinist and I played basketball, ran track, and didn't tell anybody in my super supportive ass family that I wanted to be an actor. I was just like, but you want to talk about always.
Think about not having multiple representative images created the potential for someone of your talent, and someone out there right now won't make that pivot that you made.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so, like, anyhow, I'm just.
No, I mean, I think that that's a huge part of it. I knew how to become a professional athlete if that's what I wanted. I knew how to become a professional violinist if that's what I wanted. But I didn't know anyone who was an actor. And even though by that time, I mean, we're talking about 1999, 2000, when I went to college, you've got plenty of TV shows, you've got plenty of movies. You know, this is during what I call the Black Renaissance, where you had The Best Man, The Wood, you had all the TV shows. This was post A Different World and The Cosby Show, and now you're in the, Black sitcom and even some Black dramas. It was still like, that's so far away. So I ended up taking an acting for non-majors class. My teacher was super supportive. She still is. She still sends me students for me to mentor, which is amazing that she even, thinks about me in that way. And I'd say that I have someone that I've mentored, but she was already at Yale, but she had graduated from Howard, and she was getting ready to graduate from Yale. And now she's on a show on Showtime, City on a Hill. Her name is Lauren Banks. But, that's just like who this professor was, who ended up becoming the department head at Howard. But I took her class, and I said, should I change my major? And she's like, no, just take as many classes as you want. And so I graduated with almost a double major, but basically a minor in theater.
Right.
Went to BADA, the British American Drama Academy, post graduation in Oxford. It's a program that, they do over in Oxford, England every summer. I have tons of people who reach out to me about that. Like, should I do it? Did you have a good experience? Which I did. And I met some great artists, 3 of whom went on to do and are still doing great things. One of whom, Nelson Ellis, who played Lafayette on True Blood and, was a phenomenal artist who's no longer with us. And I have another friend named Ngozi, who's a phenomenal playwright and actor. She's had her work produced all over the country. And then another friend named Ryder Doyle, who is a writer on a show that he created on Netflix and produced called Bonded, about this guy who's like the roommate to a BDSM dominatrix. And it's like a comedy, and it's so fitting for him to have written this. He's also on this show called Barry. But, those are the 3 people that I was like the coolest with, the tightest with, and they have went on to do great things. And so post BADA, moved back home, saved money, moved to LA, and for 10 years did everything from waiting tables and cocktail waitressing, delivering laundry, auditioning. And then, stuff started to happen.
Let me ask you, what skills did you learn from those side jobs? Because I often say, like, one of my favorite, I pumped gas for 2 years.
Oh, yeah.
New Jersey.
In Jersey, you can't pump your own gas.
You can't pump your own gas in New Jersey. And so my ex-girlfriend, the girlfriend at the time, her father owned a gas station. And so I would come home from NYU every weekend and pump gas. And it was mostly to get some pocket change. I have many worldly possessions, and to kick it with her.
Except for your Jordans.
Except my Jordans, And so I learned a lot I learned things there that I think make me a better director. I learned how people view different people based off of where they assume they fit into the hierarchy of life. I didn't love that job, but now when I go somewhere, man, I'm like, hey, what's up, Mr. Janitor? You know what I mean? Yo, thank you. Like, what kind of things did you learn as you journeyed through what you got to do to stay afloat in pursuit of the dream?
God, so many intangibles, honestly. It wasn't that, I learned anything new in terms of the way that people are or human behavior is, or, these are all things that I just observed and witnessed that kind of live in me as an artist, that I can then say, oh, I know who this character is, or I know people like this kind of person. But I waited tables at everywhere from the Cheesecake Factory to Katana to Katsuya to the Montage. That was my last table waiting job in LA.
The
Montage Beverly Hills, and that was full of some crazy.
You built some character up in that one.
Oh my goodness! But I will say, I'm gonna come back to this story about Will Smith. I'll come back to that. But I will say, waiting tables and doing commercials has made me the person that I am in terms of my ability. Dorian and I, we laugh about it. We say it's like my special skill. Like, I know how to get in, have a conversation with the person, and get the fuck out of it. Because when you're waiting tables, you've got 30 seconds to endear someone to you, to make them feel comfortable, to let them know that you're going to take care of them. And then you got 5 other tables to take care of.
Yeah. But you want to get that tip.
You want to get that tip. You want to make sure that they feel special, and not only make sure they feel special, but actually have a connection with them. Like, what are you doing here? What are you celebrating? What brings you out tonight? Oh, where are you guys from? These things are real things that I find myself employing every day on set. And so when I go on set, I remember on my first big job, which was Luke Cage, Mike Coulter used to call me Huggy Bear. He was like, oh, here we go with Huggy Bear. She got to hug everybody before she get to set. But that was how I felt. It was like there was no person that was unimportant. There was no department that I wanted to ignore. I'm asking you what you did for the weekend. How did your kid's soccer game go? And I mean it. But it came from not only the customers that you dealt with, but your fellow employees that you worked with, where you created, a family. And so that, and commercials, like when you book a commercial, you have to go in and essentially sell yourself for 3 minutes and let them know you're not crazy, you're not a diva, you're not going to act a fool on set, you know how to sell a product. And if there is anything that is network television, it's selling products. Like what they say, that TV shows are created to sell Tide, you know what I mean? And so the ability to make a mass amount of people across the country that is so varied identify with you as an individual, I think is in a way marketing. And obviously I'm not approaching the work thinking, how do I sell this Tide? Or how do I, let this person feel good about me? That's not how it is. But I think that it is something that has filtered its way into something in some way.
Well, I wanted to know, because I feel like there is a responsibility in being number one on a call sheet that is best realized by someone who understands how to work a room. And I think that I feel like there are these things that kind of get negative connotations. So like I often talk to people and I'm like, it's not networking, it's nurturing, right? Like find a real connection to this person, have a genuine interest in their success, and leave a wake of just good vibes behind you. I was talking to Kelly again last night, and I was like, I was talking to some other directors, and I was like, they're like, oh, well, how do you? I'm like, I'm going through all these meetings and nothing's happening. I'm like, yo, like I used to be you. I'm gonna tell you something, and you're not gonna feel like it's an answer. But I feel like your expectation is fucking you up, because you just have to be a boat moving through this industry. People have to know where you want to dock it. So for me, it was like, know that I want to do half-hour single camera comedies, because that was my first target. So I could do that and then transition to a show like yours, right? But like, just leave a wake as your boat is just out there looking for a dock of like, yo, that boat's nice. That boat runs well. Yo, I got on the boat for 10 minutes. Yo, they had like cool food and shit. Like it was good vibes. and there when a spot opens up at the dock, like I think we should put that boat here. And you get 300 people, 10, 20, whatever amount of people to feel that way about your boat, you will dock that boat.
Absolutely.
That's just how it is. And I think that's a good I'm looking forward to directing the show because so I can see the number one in action. You had a Will Smith story though.
Yes, and I think it filters into the way that I look at number ones, and being in that position. So it was early morning, super early morning, like 9 a.m. No one's really in this area, which we called the lobby lounge at the time. And so it was like a place where you could go in, do your coffee. It was open all day. Cocktails at night, breakfast and coffee and stuff during the day, afternoon tea. But it was a place that like people would take meetings. There was a writer, God, what was his last name? Bass. He wrote like a ton of stuff, but I forget his first name now. But anyway, he made that his writer's room. So he and his assistant would come in and just prop up all day and just drink coffees and cappuccinos and be in there. And so one day, in walks Will Smith and Tom Cruise. Small time Peanuts actors, right? And they're taking
wait, I imagine you did like a quintuple take.
It was like, what the fuck is happening? Because it was also early, right? And I knew that there was a private meeting in the back room. But I didn't know who it was. And so they walk in and I watch Will Smith from what is like the back corner of the room, the back east corner of the room, walk all the way to the southwest corner of the room. And every person that was in there, hey, how you doing, Will? Nice to meet you. Hey, how you doing, Will? Nice to meet you. And Tom was like, oh shit, we're doing this. Hey, Tom. Hey, I'm Tom. And he was like, what the fuck? I didn't know we were shaking hands, Will. But how many times do you meet people who are not name famous? And you go, hey, Pete Chapman, nice to meet you. Hey, nice to meet you, Pete. And you're like, what the fuck is your name? Like, are you not going to introduce yourself? Do you just assume that I know who you are? And the fact that this man was who and is still who he is at this, extremely high level of fame, popularity, notoriety, recognition, and still thought it important to go and say hello to every single person in the room.
Right.
That was for me such a wonderful visual, because so often, like I said, I come across people who are just like, they think their shit don't stink. And you're like, yeah, but it do. You know what I mean? And not in like you're nothing, but in a way that we are all human beings. And so that's the way that I try to operate on set. It's like, we are all here to do a job. My background actors to me are just as important as my cast members. I don't want anybody being treated wrong, disrespected, treated as a human prop. And, you know, thankfully, we have a set that operates with so much kindness that you never hear anybody yelling. And I remember our executive producer, Michael Robin, he was like, that's just not something that I allow on my show. There's no reason why you should be yelling at your grip department or your lighting department or your background actors for that matter. And so when we hear people curse, even though I curse like a sailor, but even when you hear people curse, you're like, who let the gate in? Like, who opened the gate? Who let these people in? Because it's such a set of like respect and kindness and love. And I think that, you know, if I came in there, I've only had 6 hours of sleep. I had a 4 a.m. start. I'm tired. I'm annoyed. One, I'm getting paid to do what I love. And there are plenty of people who would want to be here. So that concept of like, you know, feel bad for me. It's like, do you know how many people are not getting paid anything close to what you're getting paid to do what they love or what they kind of like, what they have to do? And so I do not complain. I try not to encourage complaining. I don't want people to not feel heard and seen. But when what I won't allow is like a spirit of ungratefulness, because I remember waiting tables, and this is such a quick thing, but waiting tables at the Cheesecake Factory. When I came in, that was the job. When I moved to LA, I was like, I gotta get this job. The Cheesecake Factory. I have to work at the Cheesecake Factory at the Grove, right? And so I get the job when they were like, we're not hiring any waiters. And I'm like, yeah, sure. You don't know who I pray to. And so I got in and they were like, you're hired? And I was like, of course I am. You didn't know what I did. So I get in there and everybody there is like, just watch out. The tips are shitty. The customers are awful. We get all these tourists. Nobody tips 20%. It's going to be terrible. I was like, oh, you don't know the God I know. And every single table, I was getting 20%. And it didn't matter who it was. It didn't matter the most stereotypical, these people don't tip people. They were giving me 20%. And I was like, I'm really sorry that you guys, you know, are having such a tough time, but I'm not. And somewhere in there, all of that negativity, all of that, I hate this job, these people are awful, it started to filter in. It started to trickle into me. One table give me a bad tip, and I'm like, another table, and then it became 3 tables, and it became 7, then it became everybody, to where I hated my job. I was like, these people are awful. I am not getting what I deserve. They are shitty tippers. And I realized it was because I allowed all that negativity to color what I knew was a blessing from the moment I got there. And so I said, I will never, ever, ever let that happen on a job when it comes to acting. And so that's how I, you know, work from here on out. Much like I'm sure you work as a director the way that you did when you were pumping gas. Like, I'm going to get to know people. I'm going to make sure that people, and every time you go and get your gas pumped, or you're going and dealing with people on a, you know, service level.
Yeah, I think this is a really good conversation. And I would say to listeners who think perhaps we're off topic, we're actually sharing the nucleus of success in this industry. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, like, it's not going to be about solely how well you act or how well you direct. And in many regards, you won't even get to the point of displaying your skill if you're not able to navigate and present positivity to the people that you must maneuver through, you know?
Yeah.
Yo, this is Dorian Missick, aka DJ Tailwind Turner from the ABC show For Life, and you're listening to Let's Shoot with my man Pete Chapman.
What's up, people? This is Pete Chapman. Follow me on Instagram and on Twitter via @PeteChapman. Follow the pod on Facebook on our Let's Shoot with Pete Chapman official page, and hit up our mailbag with questions, suggestions, or hey, donations if you're feeling like it, via Let's Shoot with Pete Chapman @gmail.com. And just in case you need to know how to spell it, that's Pete with the last name CHATMON.
to Succeed as a Creative Professional is Pete Chapman's upcoming book about his journey as a director. What started in 1993 has been a marathon full of persistence and creative pivots, transitioning from indie filmmaker to teaching at NYU's acclaimed film school, to running a production company, to directing television and commercials, and ultimately eyeing a return to the feature films that gave him his start. A mixture of how-to, self-help, and inspiration, this book will be for any person eyeing a successful career in a creative art. How to Succeed as a Creative Professional is coming soon.
So I want to, I guess I'll hop to 2014,
15?
yeah, 15, maybe, okay. We make BlackCard,
2014.
2014. Yeah, I think we shot it at the end of 14. And
November.
so November.
It was cold.
It was cold. It was great. I had most of the cast, but I hadn't really gotten to meet you like thoroughly. And I remember when y'all got married, like I ain't had no money to go to Bahamas, you know what I'm saying? So I was like, I love them photos, I saw y'all jump the broom. But I was looking for someone to play that character, and Dorian was like, yo, Simone. And I was like, you sure, man? Like, I don't mean to ask it like that, but like,
No, I remember being so nervous. And Dorian was like, don't worry. Like, Simone, you're good. Like, Pete just, he wants to know. And I felt like this was the most important audition to not fuck up. You know what I mean? I was like, if I just stink up the place, then he's going to think, one, I got an obligation to my friend to be like, sorry, man, your girl is terrible.
But I feel like we just had a conversation, though.
We
like,
did, but I felt like that was an audition, like a meeting is an audition.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I feel
Yeah.
like I had to send over some stuff. I feel like there was like, I had to send over.
There was a
You're
short
not just gonna,
film called Voiceover, if I'm not mistaken, that I watched. Voicemail. Okay.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, like I'm looking for the nuance. I'm looking for like a sensibility. And then this is great for directors too. Like a lot of times you're going to cast people, particularly when I did my feature, wasn't nobody fucking auditioning for me. I was the person with the least experience. So I basically, I either had to outright offer the job, or for people who weren't like Hill, Harper, and Zoe Saldana or Frankie, like I might get a coffee. And in that coffee, I'm actually auditioning mostly for like, do you get what's happening on the page? And are you connected to the themes of the material? But also like, are you going to try and play me like on set? Like, are you going to treat me like shit? Like there's one person, and maybe one day I'll give her name, but she's a Broadway actress, Black female, kind of legendary.
I already know what you're talking about.
And I was like, wow, this how you going to be like over tea? This is you? You know what I'm saying? And I was like, cool, that's great, because now I know. And as much as exposure as maybe she could have brought to the role, it would have fucking been horrible. You know what I'm saying? And that is an audition as well.
I'm curious, how do you as a director feel about offer only? Because I know how I as an actor feel about it, and it's probably not the way 90% of actors feel about it, but how do you feel about it?
I feel that I can look at enough of your work, because that's my job, and get a sense of like how you manipulate, and I don't mean that negatively, how you manipulate moments, right? So like, do you, like some actors you can look at and be like, oh, you have a set of tools that you just go to that are like fucking knee jerk, and you think that means listening when you make that face. You know what I mean? And then there's folks
the jaw clench.
Yeah, the jaw.
The lip quiver.
Yeah.
There are all kinds of tricks. We all have tells. I mean, that's just human behavior. It's human behavior.
Right.
But I know what you mean.
But you can look and you'd be like, okay, you just going back to the bag. And then there's folks where you're like, okay, I see what you're doing here. And if you look at enough, it starts sounding pompous, but fuck it. If you understand what can happen with a moment, how it's really about little decisions that mean everything, then I think you get to a point where you can watch enough of someone's work and get a sense of what they are doing. I think if you only see it in one or two things, like you might have fallen into a harder to read scenario because maybe they just had some super dope direction and didn't agree with what they did, but it just happened twice, right? But I think you're kind of like looking for that. And then so I get the offer only, but I feel like at a minimum, folks need to have a conversation to connect and to talk thematically, particularly because a lot of the things that I want to try and do are like tonal tightropes. And it's like, can you find a joke in that moment, but not play the joke? And can you, like, you know what I mean? Like, do you understand the politics underneath that? And so for our conversation on BlackCard, it was clear rather that was beyond anchored in your wheelhouse. It was something that you would excel at and elevate because there's so many things going on underneath for that character.
Yeah. I mean, that was such a great experience. It was so great. And I think that what was funny was what Dorian and I worked on in our portion of it. And then when you saw how everything else came together and was layered with all the other characters, like, oh, the damn, what was the group? The
commission.
They were like, the commission. God, the moment with Steven when he's like throwing the kale and the guys, like there was just so much in it that was so genius and brilliant and just well done, man. It was just so well done that I was happy to be a part of, you know, that kind of storytelling that I just didn't see that often, you know, when it came to people that look like me, like that kind of, you know, dark comedy in a way, political commentary, social commentary, what is Blackness, like all of those things that I'm sure we've all had to either explain to somebody or experience or, you know, talk about at a dinner party. All of those things. It was so well done. It was so smart. And it was a lot of fun to be a part of. But I remember just being terrified. Like, don't fuck this up, don't fuck this up, don't fuck this up.
It's so funny, man. It's interesting hearing those things. You know what I mean? I remember when I did my first short with Dorian. Now we're talking 1997, and a friend who was producing told me, I think because you know, everything's by hook or crook, ain't no money, and the call time was super early, so I think he had to crash at her place so we could coordinate all the morning like pickups. And she said, yeah, he was practicing the lines in the shower. I could hear him running the lines, and I was like, yo, that's what's up. And literally like that, I was like, yo, somebody out here practicing my lines, you know, like. And literally, man, I mean, we've done so many things together, everything, and gonna continue. So let's kind of fast forward to All Rise, and you know, you've had such an interesting journey from kind of pushing down this desire to be an actor to navigating theater and all of the politics there, I'm sure, and then really kind of because, well, let me ask you, was BlackCard like and Voicemail, were those like your first kind of filmed things?
No, so I had, interestingly enough, as an undergrad at Howard, I did a grad student's thesis. He did a full-length feature, and that was my first movie experience. And, you know, it was kind of like, I'm in college, this is great, I get to be an actor. And I remember, oh God, that It was billed as like the male Sex in the City, which I think every Black man was trying to make for like a decade. Because I remember when I met Dorian, he was working on Lenox Avenue, which was billed as the male Sex in the City. So I was like, y'all just been trying to do this shit for a long ass time. But that was my first experience, and I remember feeling used by that particular project. The character was someone that one of the guys was dating or on a date with. And the joke of it was that he was drunk and my character wasn't. And he was poking my boob and saying like Pisces. And I'm like, what the fuck is this? And I remember just not feeling good about it. Like that was the joke. And not feeling good about the joke. Like it wasn't, that wasn't written in the stage directions when I auditioned for it. You know what I mean? Right. And I remember my grandparents came because, you know, I'm at Howard, so I'm in DC, and they came and I was like so embarrassed. Like my granddad is watching somebody poking my boob in a movie. What the fuck is this? But that was my first, you know, film experience. And then I ended up, when I moved to LA, I booked a film called The Road to Sundance. And it was about a woman whose husband died unexpectedly. They had been working on a movie, indie film producers. And so she wanted to carry on and complete the movie. And she teams up with this diva, you know, white guy who's kind of well known, but he's, you know, got his own bad reputation, and this is like supposed to be his way of like getting in the indie world and rebranding himself, and you know, the fish out of water, all of that. And I met a really good friend of mine who wrote and directed Voicemail, Thomas Frazier. That was where he and I met. But that was such an amazing learning experience for me, because the film, low budget feature film, the woman who wrote it, this was a labor of love for her. And so we started out, and she's got these huge ideas. So we're flying to Baltimore to shoot this film. I was like, this is amazing. This is my first film in LA. I was maybe there for like 3-5 months, and now somebody's flying me to Baltimore to film. And, you know, there were all of these like grand ideas about it. And we flew to Baltimore. We ended up shooting in her childhood home that had not been prepped for the process. So there was like a deep clean. There was a deep clean that had to happen in order for them to film there. And there was this feeling of like, wait, why are we here? Like, why did we have to shoot at this house? Because it was an emotional thing for her, but it didn't make sense budget-wise, story-wise, or production-wise. Then my friend was like, he's from Baltimore. He's like, why are we not shooting at the harbor? Why are we not getting any B-roll of Baltimore? And they were like, oh, we didn't think of that. And so that's when the wheels started to fall off, where you're like, okay, maybe these people don't really know what they're doing. The film, which was only supposed to last about 2 weeks, ended up lasting a year.
Oh, boy.
Because she kept piecing together money, calling up everybody. Hey, guys, come on. I got some more money. Let's finish filming. I can do these 3 scenes this weekend. And I became an ungrateful little piece of shit. I'm the lead of this movie, the co-lead of this movie. No one has given me a fucking job up to this point. And I'm like, ugh, here she go again. I don't care what my hair look like. I ain't changing it. I mean, just like this ridiculous level of undeserved privilege. Like, how dare she want me to maintain continuity for her film? Just shit where you're like, what the fuck are you talking about? And if you're shooting a Christopher Nolan film or, you know, whoever, that shit can take a year. Get your shit together and show up. So that never got another feature film for maybe another decade. Maybe another decade. And I said, I got you. I see what that is. Thank you. I learned that lesson. I learned it quick. If you can't, you know, the Bible says, he who is faithful in least will be faithful in much, which is just the idea that if you got a little, and you don't appreciate it, take care of it,
Right.
nurture it, you're not going to get the big stuff. And that
Right.
was such a powerful lesson to me. It was like, don't, piss on your blessings. And how wonderful of an experience for an actor to have to come back to a character and drop into it for a year and figure it out.
Right.
What do you think shooting television is? You might take 3.5 months off, and then you got to come back and be that character. What are you talking? Do you understand the way the world works? So it was just a beautiful experience for me. But that was my first. Those were my first.
It does seem like it was kind of disorganized, though.
Absolutely, 100%. I mean, it was disorganized. We lost the director, then we lost the DP. So the woman who wrote it and was producing it and editing it started directing it. The DP was some young kid that she grabbed from USC. I mean, it was all over the place, but I could have made it better. Like, instead of looking at it like, how can I just fall in line with everybody and be like, this is some bullshit, I at least could have showed up and did my job at the very least. So yeah, I mean, yes, it was disorganized, and there are things that you learn from that, but.
Well, I think that's a good experience, though, because you have to. I have missteps that I've made along the way on smaller projects.
Why? What are they? Why? What are they, Pete Chapman?
Well, you know what? So, there are like 2 points that are kind of operating, or 2 things that are operating in my mind at simultaneously. One, for everybody listening, like, hear the duration of this journey, and also hear the camaraderie developed amongst other people who were in pursuit of the same thing. So, like, when you mention the folks from the academy at Oxford, and those people are out here working, and you probably still talk to them, right? You mentioned Luke Cage. I think back to 2010 when I shot a web series in Mike Coulter's apartment in Jersey City. You know what I'm saying?
Wow.
And so, like, just because they had a dope spot, and I was like, can I shoot here? And 2016, 2014, BlackCard to All Rise 2020. You know what I mean? It's such a journey, and it's important that you just keep your eye on the target and just work and work and work, and you'll get there. But the thing that I had a learning experience from was actually a project that we worked on together, and we did. It was American Cocoa, and so even the world works in such interesting ways, because I remember when BlackCard was screened at CAM, right? And California African American Museum. And the writer, creator, star of that project, Diara Kilpatrick, her mom, Elise, R.I.P., God bless her, had reached out about BlackCard. And so I sent her the film, and then it didn't get there, so I ended up having to resend it. But we had like a nice convo, and I don't know that that's the connection to come. And I don't know if you ever spoke to Diara as well, but then I ended up directing American Cocoa, and then you're in that as well.
Yeah. We did. She was like, what do you think about Pete Chapman? I was like, fucking dope.
Man, so again, another example of like the journey, right? But I was learning, I had not yet learned, coming from the feature film world, how to really operate in a television space. And because that show was shot kind of like a film, we did 15 days and 12 episodes, and it was like a lot. It was like 10 pages a day. I was like, I'm not giving you a shot list. you know what I'm like? I will make the days. Like, I guarantee you, I made every single one of them, but I was like kind of adamant about it. And I'm pretty sure that left people with a sense of unease, right? Exactly. But that's because I was really tethered to like, this is like a film, and like it's coming at us quick. and I'm prepping and prepping and prepping. I don't necessarily have it all like it's going to be XYZ, but I know how to do it. And then I also know, like, if we get behind, I can change how I'm going to shoot it at a moment's notice, and I'll still get you what you need from the scene. But that was a thing that, like, when I kind of did a Monday morning quarterback on it and looked at how I handled that situation, I was like, okay, I'm not going to do that again, because I understand the level of comfort that that gives to the team that has hired you. And so moving forward, I began to give my shot list and my blocking diagrams and all that I share on Instagram to not only—
Which I love.
Thank you. I share that with the AD and I share that with the DP. And now it's interesting because then I see the relief that comes with it, because then they're like, he's prepared.
Yeah.
And it's just the fact that they're looking at the document.
Mm-hmm. They don't even care if you really execute it.
They don't even care if I'm really going to do it. Right.
You just need to know that you have it.
That was an important education for me. And what's interesting now is that, you know, when I did Silicon Valley, nobody asked me for anything, because now they're like, he knows what he's doing. And so I just show up and I'm like, boop, boop, boop. I still do all of that. And I'll still, some shows will require it, like Station 19 required me to do it, because there's so many moving parts and it's complicated and people might think they got it, but you can fall off track quickly when you got 8 fire trucks and 20 people that are talking, and you, you know what I'm saying? Like, so that was that evolution. The lesson. But for you, so like, as we turn toward the conclusion here, like, what does All Rise mean to you?
Much like, you know, you say people reach out to your wife to say, like, hey, my daughter dressed up as Maggie for Halloween. I get grown women who reach out and say, I am a judge. Thank you for putting this image out. I am a lawyer. Thank you for putting this image out. I get younger people who are like, I want to be a lawyer because of you. I am staying in law school because of you. Now I might want to become a judge because of you, and the show. So, you know, that's one huge element of it. I think that, you know, when it's all said and done and we look back at this show, whatever it is right now in the zeitgeist, what it will be later on, I hope, is the beginning of telling multicultural stories and not, I can't think of the word, but taking advantage of them, you know, not taking the most stereotypical idea of them and exploiting them, but actually telling stories about people of color, and not telling just stories about people of color. Like, you're actually just trying to tell stories and the people happen to be of color. And so you'll get an idea about that particular culture, that community, that background, because you're just telling a good story. For me, it is the culmination of everything in my career that has prepared me for this thus far. You know, I have gotten to play strong women who work, you know, in the legal system or the justice system. You know, Misty Knight was a cop. Being able to be on Altered Carbon and play, you know, a bounty hunter, another strong character. And now I'm playing another strong character and playing a judge. That's amazing. But then to be able to weave in the comedy that has been so important in my career for so long. And when I think about all those commercials, you know, it was always a funny commercial. Like, I was always getting paid to be funny. And yet I remember my dad was like, I forget, it was after a short film that I did. And he was like, you really need to get back into comedy. And I was like, oh, Dad, shut up. But that seed was like, yeah, I do. Like, that is what I love. That is what I fell in love with as a kid, watching sitcoms. And so to be able to do all of that on a show that tackles these really huge issues that are important, that are present, from immigration, physical abuse, domestic violence, drug usage, environmental terrorism against people of color in disadvantaged communities, gender bias, racial bias in the medical system, and now COVID-19 and how that is filtering to every aspect of our society. To be able to handle these issues and still have pratfalls and still have, jokes, still find the levity, still be able to make people laugh and feel good, and yet handle these things. Like, I think that it's important. I hope it's a genre that we see developed a little bit more, as opposed to just, the idea of like the half-hour comedy that deals with drama. We have the hour-long drama that deals with comedy, and with people of color, And so I look at All Rise as just an opportunity to do all of the things that I love with the people that I love, and to share that love with, the world. And it's amazing. It really is. Like, I'm so thankful and blessed to be able to have fans all over the world who are like, man, I loved you as Misty Knight, and I really like this show now. But is Luke Cage coming back? You know what I mean? Like, it's a great thing to be able to have had just these really, outstanding opportunities, and that they're not passing me by. I'm not looking up and I'm like, fuck, I just really didn't appreciate that. Like, I appreciate every single day that I get to go to work and, tell these stories. And so, that's where All Rise is for me and in my heart. And I hope that we can do it for a good amount of time, and continue to see more directors of color work, more female directors work, more writers of color, more female writers work, and get more actors on the screen who are not just the same people that you see on the same shows, but that we're actually taking a chance and casting outside of the box, and casting people. We would bring characters on, and I will have read it in the script, and I'm like, oh, that person's gonna be white, and then they'll show up and it'll be a woman, and it'll be like a Latinx woman, and I'm like, yeah. I see that happening. So, I just enjoy this process. It's fast and furious and unforgiving as television is, especially 22 episodes of television. I think that this one is an important one.
So in closing, any final kind of words of wisdom that you would want to share with, that up and coming storyteller? Because whether they're an actor or a director, like, I feel like maybe there's a universal kind of principle or that is worth imparting from your journey.
I think about a couple different visuals that I often had when I was working, striving, waiting. Dorian and I would joke that it felt like pissing in the ocean. And it's not. There was another one that kind of related back to your boat analogy, which is send out improper ships. We always feel like it has to be perfect. It has to be, thoroughly furnished. Everything has to be on it. It's got to be just right. And it's like, just send out the ships, man. Just send them out. And somebody is going to let your boat dock on their pier. You know what I mean? Like, just send it out. And the other thing is just another thing is be nice. Yeah. You never know who you might work for. The person that you treated like shit might be the person that helps you get your next job. It might be the person who says, no. It might be the person who says, yeah, take a chance on that guy. I remember that. I got a good feeling about that person. I don't know what it is. And so, because as you've pointed out, so many people have worked with so many people where we find ourselves, it's like these circles that just keep crossing over. And you got to be nice to everybody on the way up, because you might see them on the way down. And you better be happy when you do, and they better be happy to see you. And then the other thing is, like, honestly, never give up. Like, my family, we affectionately say I was a 10-year overnight success. The people, they were like, where did she come from? And I was like, I was probably your server at the Cheesecake Factory, and it came from, thankfully, my husband and my family just continuing to, impart in me to not give up, that it was going to happen, that I was talented. And thankfully, I had that tribe around me who poured into me positivity and prayer and love. But at a certain point, it had to come from within as well to know, like, no, this is what I'm supposed to do. It's not happening in the timetable that I thought, but if I don't give up, it will happen. And I'm seeing friends of mine, people that I was on the, on the circuit with, struggling, trying to get jobs with, who are now, leads of shows, recurrings on shows, working, directing. I mean, you know what I mean? Look at what has happened for your career just in the past 5, 6 years when it comes to directing. That is not, it doesn't come from giving up, So if you just keep doing the work, put your head down and keep trying, it can happen. And so I think those are 5 little jewels. I just thought
that is spot on. So my last question, and this is one I'm taking from Dorian, actually put me onto this All the Smoke podcast, which is great with Steven Jackson and Matt Barnes. And actually, it's been kind of sad because Steven Jackson, George Floyd was his homie. Yeah, so that's how I kind of first saw it, like with his Instagram live. Where he was like, I gotta wake up to this bullshit, And but one thing that they do is they ask, who do you think should be our next guest on Let's Shoot with Pete Chapman? And then if you happen to know that person, can you make that happen?
That's a good question. Who should be your next guest? I think that, let me make sure I'm running through all the actors. I think,
and it could be anything. It could be a producer. It could be a writer, a creator. It could be an executive. Like we're talking to everybody.
I think I'm gonna say Cheo Hodari Coker.
All right.
And I could definitely do the introduction, but I think Cheo is a brilliant mind, wonderful human being. He's got an interesting journey from being a journalist and a writer to being a showrunner and, show creator.
Well, I know Cheo. I was, my sister's very good friends, and I'm friends with his cousins from Montclair. But if you put that little seed in there, I can come on, man. You know how it is.
Me.
All right. Well,
I got you.
Simone Missick, thank you for joining the podcast and for being so open with your journey and for sharing your pearls with the people listening.
Thank you, Pete.
That is a wrap on episode 4 of Let's Shoot with Pete Chapman. Tune in next time for episode 5, where we'll have another surprise guest, because I don't know who's going to join us when I wrap up the prior episode. This has been a pleasure. Hit me up at the mailbag. Let's shoot with Pete Chapman at gmail.com. Let me know, questions, insight, advice, whatever. If there are things that you want answered, shoot them to me there, and I will pull them into the intros if I can, or at least in the outros somewhere. Or maybe they'll even make their way into the interview. Thank you all for all the support. Again, I got to thank my team, Tristan Nash on the post-production, Jada George on the coordination and administration. And until the next time, y'all, stay safe and spread love.